right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's presentation from Labster about teaching anatomy and physiology with virtual labs. My name is Mark Fuller. I'm a member of Labster's product team. I'll be your host today, but I'm very excited that we're going to have a great lineup of guests, so you won't just be hearing my voice the entire day. But I wanted to jump into the agenda for this presentation. We'll begin by talking just a little bit about Labster's learning content in anatomy and physiology, our virtual lab simulations that we have now, what's new and forthcoming in 2022, what's coming out in the next few months, as well as some of the supplements we have available. And then I'm very excited to invite a few guests to join us. I'll introduce them in just a moment in the faculty panel to actually hear some real experiences, tips, advice on how to teach with this stuff, right? How to, in an A&P1 course or in different types of perhaps course environments, how do you integrate virtual lab simulations into your teaching? And then we'll take a bit of a look into some of our newer virtual labs, and then we'll have some time for audience Q&A, hopefully toward the end. Maybe running about 45 or 50 minutes for the presentation, depending on how quickly we speak, but we would love to hear from you. So even though everyone is muted today, I would encourage you to start sending your questions in through either the questions function or the chat function, and we'll get to those at the end, but we'll reserve response to the questions until the end of the presentation. So, and by the way, there will be a recording of this, so we'll send it out by email after the fact, along with some other resources and links that might be useful. So very, very excited to welcome Professor Richard Bailey from Northeastern Technical College here today, as well as Professor Margaret Brady from South Dakota State College of Science. She'll be joining asynchronously, so to speak, via video, recording that we pre-recorded a little bit earlier. And then joined by my colleague Francisco as well, who helps lead up the team developing our new A&P simulations in the spring and summer and fall of this year. So thank you everybody who's joining here, and yeah, we'll be calling on you soon. So there may be many of you who are already familiar with Labster simulations at this point, but I want to take just a minute or two as a refresher for those who may be newer to our approach to virtual labs, for instance. So let me just pull up this video here, and really the way to think about Labster is our virtual lab simulations combine interactive lab experiences and experiments with scientific theory, 3D visualizations, quiz questions, realistic storylines, almost a gamified case study. And the idea is it's wrapped into a single kind of gamified learning experience for students, in which they are, hopefully more engaged than they would otherwise be, a little bit more motivated. We're trying to improve their grades, their learning outcomes, and also extend your lab experience in person and enhance it a little bit. We have a growing A&P package collection. You saw some of the systems that we're covering, and as well as many supplements. You see those on the screen here now. We'll talk more about those later. But really one of the ideas here is that we want to help provide access to an anatomy and physiology lab anytime, anywhere, including in the middle of the night, right? And we want the students to be able to take the lab home with them and take those lessons home with them and practice at their own pace. We want them to be able to repeat experiments or exercises or visualizations to try to understand it a little bit better. They can speed up and slow down time if they want to. They can also just take that time to better prepare for in-person training and in-person lab experiences or classroom experiences. And on the instructor side, we're hoping that we can help save you time and effort. Automated grading, we have LMS integration with Canvas and Blackboard and all the different systems. We have a teacher dashboard where you can track their progress. And the platform in general, we have over 250 virtual lab simulations as of this speaking. I'm sure we'll be over 300 before long. And that covers material in biology, chemistry, physics. So it's there available to help plug some of the gaps, maybe some of those prerequisites that your students could use a little bit of extra help with in certain cases. So in terms of what we have today, we really have about 20 or so, but a little more than 20 core simulations available in our anatomy and physiology, what we call our course package. Our course package just means it's something that we've curated, a little bit of a list. We say, we think these titles may be interesting for you if you teach A and P. Some of those you can see here, some of the existing titles that have been out. You see it across different systems. We have our muscle tissue simulation is very popular, homeostatic control, smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, action potential, various physiology simulations. But the big point here is that we are growing this package, and we're going to talk more about it, about that in a few minutes. I also wanted to, I made reference to this before, but our platform in general, Labster really started in sort of the biosciences and biological science fields. And we've moved in major ways into chemistry, organic chemistry, microbiology, even physics in some cases, different levels of content, covering about 20 different courses. And now having this large library of supplements that go around the simulations too, as well as some very exciting, we have a new nursing, virtual reality nursing partner. So if you or anyone of your colleagues might actually teach in those later kind of higher level nursing programs, we have some options there as well. But I think at this point, I would love to invite Francisco up, our expert here, and maybe you can talk a little bit, Francisco, about what's coming next in the next few months.
Yes, sure. So hello, everyone. Thanks, Mark, for having me today. So as Mark said, so we have more than 20 ANP simulations available today. So we released already 3 simulations in January, 3 simulations about the nervous system. So growth function of the nervous system, introduction to the nervous system, and also microanatomy of a neuron. And as we speak, so we are currently working on 4 new simulations that will be released in April. So the idea is to cover like as many systems as we can. So we'll have 1 simulation about the skin layers and the organ anatomy, 1 simulation about the pulmonary ventilation, another one about female gross anatomy. This one is co-created with one ANP teacher. And the last one that will be coming in April will be absorption in the small and large intestine. So that's 4 new exciting new simulations coming soon. And later, like in July, we'll have another simulation about the reproductive system. So male gross anatomy. We will be covering even more the nervous system because it's a difficult topic for students to learn. So we'll be like covering 1 simulation about the central nervous system, another simulation about skeletal muscle anatomy, and also body plan in July. And yeah, so towards the end of the year, we'll continue to cover as many topics and systems as we can.
And this is always where I like to mention that the simulations that we prioritize, because of course we have 2 squads of game designers and scientists working on these simulations and 3D artists, but we can only create so many at once, and we're really focusing on anatomy and physiology this year. But your recommendations are really helpful, right? And we try to reach out and speak to instructors and faculty as much as possible to try to understand what is most helpful to have first. But always welcome your thoughts and suggestions too, because that helps us make decisions about what to prioritize for, let's say, fall of 2022, our new simulations. So great. Well, thank you so much, Francisco. We'll come back to you in a minute, and I'm excited to speak also to Professor Bailey in a minute. But perhaps first I can show my interview, my conversation with Professor Margaret Brady at South Dakota State College of Science, talking a little bit about how she teaches with Labster simulations, her approach, what she's found, just to get a bit of almost a panel conversation going on here, even though we can't have a real-time panel necessarily. But so I'm going to just advance my slide here, and let's watch the video for a few minutes. Professor Margaret Brady here today, who is an associate professor, I believe, at the North
Mark, we cannot hear the video right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark, for
Can you hear it now?
to join you today.
Yes.
My name is Margaret Brady, and as Mark stated, I'm at North Dakota State College of Science, which is in Wapaton, North Dakota. I teach human anatomy and physiology and pathology. I've been teaching human anatomy and physiology since 1990, off and on, so not 30 years straight through. But I have a lot of experience teaching the human anatomy and physiology, and I teach lecture and lab. We have a very, very large allied health program at this college, and I actually teach more students than any other professor here because they have to take anatomy and physiology in order to move on to the dental hygiene or nursing or OTA programs.
Great. Okay, that helps set the stage a little bit. I'm curious, what methods, what materials? Can you tell me a little bit about, perhaps previous to use of virtual labs or anything else? How do you teach? How do you teach A&P? How do you approach it?
So I'm extremely old-fashioned, and I have evolved from the use of chalk on a chalkboard to expo markers on a whiteboard. And I write things on the board. And as I mentioned, I started teaching this in 1990. I write information on the board. I expect the students to write it down. I do not use PowerPoints, and I expect them to learn it. And some of my colleagues have said, you expect them to write it down and go home and learn it. And yes, I do. I like to tell stories, real life stories about certain things, share experiences with the students. In the lab, we're very hands-on. I do a lot of microscopy, and we've been dissecting organs such as the sheep brain, classical sheep brain, sheep heart, cow eye, and then the cats, dissecting cats. And I am the most anti-technology person that you would ever know. I'm the most, I'm the person you would least expect to promote Labster. And I'm really happy you invited me, Mark, to talk about my experience with Labster, because I want to support Labster, and it's a tremendous, tremendous tool. As I mentioned, I believe in the hands-on labs. I'm working very hard at our college to get a human cadaver lab, which would be the third one in our state. I believe in touch. I believe in dissection. I believe in feeling and being there, and not 3D, not virtual. However, when we first got involved with Labster was during the COVID remote learning. And a professor at NDSU recommended it to me and said that he thought I would really like it. Fine, what else can I do? I mean, you gotta do all this virtual stuff. So I liked the Labsters. I assigned a few here, a few there. I liked the stories. I liked the details. I liked the fact that Labster was taking these students and delving into a mission or a project, and delving into those details and putting them in that. I liked that. I liked that it was tedious. You put the tip on the pipette tip on, you throw it away. You go through the steps like it's a real lab. The significance for me was when I actually saw, experienced learning take place. My best example for that is in the anatomy world is the blood typing. For about 30 years, I have taught blood typing, type A, type B, etc. We have antigens, we have antibodies. This is what we do. How do we tell what type of blood this person has? I explain it in lecture. They get it. I go to lab, they're lost. 30 minutes into the lab, where's the antigen? Where's the antibody? What do I do now? I became introduced with Labster. I had the students complete Labster just as a pre-lab. The lab went well. Another colleague that was here, she's been teaching at this college for 30 years, anatomy and physiology, specifically the labs. She came up to me and said, oh my gosh, you have just become the best teacher in 30 years. I've never had this much success with them understanding how to do the blood typing. We used the blood typing, the fake blood. And she said, I've never had this happen where they just, you must be such a good teacher. I thought, oh, I had them do the Labster. The next semester, the same thing. I had the students do the Labster. They came to lab, Mark. They did the lab within 30 minutes, no questions. Everyone understood it, passed the quiz, flying colors. That's when I started to really believe that something in the brain was really clicking with the experience, with, even though it's virtual, learning's taking place. And the most significant thing that happened just 2 weeks ago was the anatomy of the heart. And I had the students do the echocardiogram, and where they put the transducer in different planes and different positions. And I thought the stimulation was a little difficult, maybe more than they need to know. They did it. They came to lab, they dissected the sheep heart, knew exactly what they were doing. So that's been my experience with Labster.
And is it, do you think it's that experience of having gone through it at least once, maybe more than once beforehand, that's getting them, in these examples, just more ready?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. For me, I like to use the Labster as maybe like a pre-lab or an experience or something. And I can't stress enough the blood typing, that they were doing that. Take the slide, move it here, try this, move it there, put the antibodies on here. And it was just the fact that they did it, you know, it's just the mouth method, but the fact that they did it, when they came to lab, it was all very familiar, it was similar, it was just repeating in their mind, but this time they were physically doing it. So I very, very much like Labster. I really think it's helping learning. I'm seeing learning take place.
That's great. And do you have any specific recommendations based on the way you've used it in the past, like recommendations for other instructors, how they may want, you know, you're looking at your syllabus and it's like, how do I integrate this, right? How do I match this up with how I'm already teaching using whatever other methods you have now? Okay. I don't know, any ideas?
I've used Labster for both lecture and for lab. In our curriculum, we have some topics that we talk about only in lecture, some of the theory, like with muscle contraction, and we don't necessarily do that in the lab. In the lab, they would be maybe dissecting muscles, or we have a system where they build clay muscles and put them on a plastic skeleton to understand the muscle. But for the muscle physiology, I would actually assign a Labster, several Labsters, depending on my unit, for lecture, to help them not just sit and watch, an animation, but to be part of it. And another thing I would like to mention is this summer I was on a committee where we evaluated Labster and 3 other lab simulation programs. And this was for the state of North Dakota. And we had professors from 11 institutions. And we all agreed at the end of the day that we wanted Labster. And another professor, not involved with this committee, said, oh, well, so-and-so has lab simulations for cheaper, and so-and-so has lab simulations. Not all lab simulations are the same. Just because it's a lab simulation doesn't mean the same learning will take place. Of course, there's different textbooks. We choose our textbooks. Not every textbook is the same. So going back to your question about adding it to the syllabus, my recommendation is really as a pre-lab, as an introduction, as getting the mind ready for what I'm going to lecture on, what I'm going to write on the board and expect them to go home and learn, that they've had that experience already.
Okay, great. No, that's. All right. Well, thank you so much, Professor Brady. And my deepest apologies. I had a bit of a typo before where I think I said South Dakota State College is North Dakota State College of Science. but yeah, really, really valuable, I think, information and perspective from her. Just some great stories also about her efforts to bring a cadaver lab to the campus, and some of the other dissections and experiments that she has done. So huge thanks to Professor Brady. But I would love to invite Professor Richard Bailey to come up and join us now as well, if you're available to. Richard?
Hey, Mark.
Hey there. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, so I guess I'm curious from your perspective, maybe even just to start, could you introduce yourself in terms of what you teach, who your students are, that sort of thing?
Sure. I'm Richard Bailey, and I teach at Northeastern Technical College. We're a very small school in rural South Carolina with about 2,000 students. I teach anatomy and physiology 1 and 2, some microbiology, but focus on A&P. And my students, 95% are trying to go into the nursing program. So that's kind of how I got involved with Labster. And just like Margaret's story about us going home virtually, it's definitely filled some voids and gaps that I didn't expect. And the carryover that I'm sure you'll ask about later into what we do now that we're back on campus has been unexpected as well.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really helpful, just to kind of help us understand where you're coming from a little bit, and especially I think who your students are. I guess I'm curious, what materials have you typically or traditionally used, even let's say even before 2020, to teach some of these topics, to teach that kind of A&P 1 course especially?
Kind of in the same vein as Margaret talked about, I'm very much a hands-on person. As far as simulations, I've never seen a lot of value in it. This has changed my mind. I've always been, if you're going to do the dissections, if you're going to point to a model, you need to be able to put your hands on it. I mean, because patients don't exist in virtual world. Patients exist in real life. If you can't handle the smells of a cat doing a dissection, a human will totally flip you out because they're 100 times nastier than any animal ever is. So we need that hands-on experience. Going home when COVID first happened and we're going all online kind of blew up my whole teaching methodology. I went to having to come up with some really nifty videos and ask 20 or 30 questions of my students, and that proved to be a poor substitute for what we did in person. And kind of like Margaret's experience, I saw with some of the Labster simulations, I started out with mitosis and meiosis. Students that were having a hard time in person with inherited traits all of a sudden started asking intelligent questions, which kind of blew my mind. And then it's I hate to say this, but we didn't talk ahead of time with Margaret, but I had the same experience with blood typing, and we did a blood typing lab last night here. Assigning that simulation ahead of time cuts your teaching time in half, and that was an unexpected pleasure.
That's great. That's really funny, actually. So in terms of how you assign them, are they, is it a true assignment? Is it mandatory, or are you just saying, if you have time, check this thing out? Are they playing the simulations multiple times? I'm just trying to get a sense of how you introduce it.
I've left the simulations as an unlimited attempt. I do give them credit for it, and I take off points if they don't. I didn't start out that way, but I found that they need a little carrot kind of dangled in front of them, and encouraging them and actually making it mandatory. There's benefits to be perceived. If you do these simulations, you will be better hands-on. If you don't do them, obviously you gain no benefit for it. So at least with our students, I have to make them mandatory.
And honestly, I think that's what we have found almost across the board, no matter who your students are or where you are in the world. We found much better results, because it's as a student, as a busy student, it's hard to force yourself to do something if it's not required necessarily, but once you get into it, we tend to see very good responses. So I guess in terms of how you're using it, is it more of the sort of the pre-lab prep that Margaret was talking about, or is it also teaching concepts, or just kind of wondering, like, what is it doing for you? What do the labs do for you?
As far as A&P 1, I'm doing the biology 210, and that's the first half of anatomy and physiology. It has been, doing pre-lab experiments. As far as doing the second half of A&P, the acid-base lab is really good because we get to the point there. They're one semester away from nursing school. Everybody probably on this call is really familiar with how important acid-base balance is to a nurse. They need to understand the respiratory input and the urinary input into what keeps our blood in its proper pH range. That lab, that simulation is invaluable. It makes helping them to understand the acid-base balance much easier than anything I've seen so far. So it's kind of a mixture. It's also helpful when they don't understand something, and maybe they played the simulation, maybe they didn't actually, get involved. I can redo that in lab and say, okay, now tell me what we just saw, and that has proven beneficial as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And can you remind me, are you all? I assume you all are in person now, but is there any hybrid element into how many students come into the lab at once, or how is that working on your campus at the moment?
We're limiting to 24 in lab now. We make them take either Bio 210 or 211, one or the other in person. So they have to come in. The other lab is still virtual. And then our microbiology is all in person.
Okay, that's great. That's helpful to know. I think that it's interesting. One of the things we've been seeing is, yeah, some limits sometimes on the number of people who can actually physically be in a lab now, and so some instructors are switching off, who comes in this week versus next week or something like that. Sometimes some of the virtual tools help mitigate that a little bit. And what about like in the future? I think that you've mentioned some of the things on your wish list too, that maybe Francisco can help with going forward in the future of kind of some additional assessments, but other topic areas. I guess I'm asking because I'm curious, looking to the next academic year or something like that, do you envision continuing to use virtual labs or like integrating them a little bit more closely with that in-person teaching experience, if possible?
I really hope we will stay in person, but having seen the value of them performing the simulations ahead of time, I can't see giving them up. Especially for topics such as pH, as blood typing, as doing acid-base balance. Those things are, I'm a believer now. If you had asked me a year and a half ago, I'd have said, nah, it can't be done this way. But I guess you can even teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, I think the world has changed for all of us a little bit too, right? But
Absolutely.
yeah. No, that's great. Okay, that's incredibly helpful. Anything else that you would add in terms of, I don't know, tips or suggestions, or if someone on this call or watching afterwards is completely new to this idea of using a virtual lab or this type of virtual lab in their teaching, like any other thoughts you would have?
Mark, I would say probably my biggest fear was loss of control. I hated turning over the control of what I shared with the students to a simulation. However, I found that they came back more qualified and more confident and ready to ask intelligent questions after the simulations. So that part has been one of those things I'd say, if you've never used virtual before, if you've never used simulations before, to give it a try, because it really can make a difference in ways you don't expect.
That's great to hear. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's often what we hear is that the experience, then, of course, like customizing it and making it your own absolutely is still done around that, right? That's just it's one tool in the toolkit, I would assume.
Exactly.
Right. So that's great. That's so helpful. Thanks so much, Professor Bailey. And I think if folks have questions for Richard, please do enter them into the questions section or the chat, and maybe we can call you back up on stage, so to speak, in a few minutes, if that's okay. If
Absolutely, be glad to.
Yeah, but thank you so much. Great. Okay. Well, then I wanted to jump back in quickly to wrap up a little bit more. Francisco spoke about some of the simulations that are coming out. Should be in early April, also in July, and then a series of additional simulations coming out in the fall in this area. I know blood components and skeletal. I think a couple of other skeletal simulations planned for the fall. But maybe we can take a moment just to dive down into some of the solutions and what these do. And so in a minute, maybe I'll turn it over to you, Francisco. I think a couple of important points to make are with our anatomy and physiology simulations, our newer simulations, some of Labster's older or some of the classic simulations we have were a bit longer, right? It could be 30 minutes or 40 minutes in some cases, but we're tending to create experiences that are a little bit more segmented now. So for example, Francisco was talking about the gross function of the nervous system simulation that was just released a few weeks ago. That simulation can be played in full, or you can just simply drill down into the microanatomy of a neuron simulation, which I want to say is maybe 20 minutes, or the introduction of nervous system simulation, which is 15 minutes, something like that. So you can have those shorter experiences and kind of move those around. If you don't necessarily want to cover all the material, if something in the middle of that simulation is that's a little bit too hard or it's beyond what I want to assign right now. So we're moving in this direction to kind of open things up a little bit more, have shorter, even more interactive experiences going forward. And then, yeah, just a couple of other key points to hit. We spoke about some of them before, but helping to address the learning gaps. You can also assign basic, intro biology content if you have some students who are maybe not as advanced as others. It's just helping to expand that lab experience, not replacing it, but as a pre-lab or doing experiments that maybe in some cases you wouldn't be able to do in for whatever reason, cost limitations or space or limitations. And also just having that kind of larger single solution for that sort of interactive learning opportunities in some of these topics. So yeah, so that's a bit of a background, but Francisco, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the cool features and some of either the new simulations that we have coming out or some that have been released in the past couple of weeks.
Yes, definitely. So so in this slide you can see two simulations. So the one on the left, so microanatomy of a neuron, was released a few weeks ago, as Mark and I mentioned earlier. And the next one, so introduction to pulmonary ventilation, will be coming like in April. So what we wanted to show, like in this these short clips, is like the benefits of using Labster. So before releasing like every simulation, we test our simulations with students, and we try to gather feedback about like what they like and what they dislike about the simulations. So like on the first one, you can see like a student that have to assemble like three different well, in this video is like only like one neuron, but in the activities they have to assemble like three different neurons. And what students really liked about this one, there's even like one student that mentioned that this activity was as good as being like in person, and then seeing this like doing this or in a physical lab. But what students really liked about this is like the activity is interactive, it's personalized, and they also like students can do this at their own pace. So so that's really like one of the benefits of Labster. And in the second clip, so the one on the right, so the simulation about pulmonary ventilation. So in this one, you have like three different characters, and like students have to like to place like a spirometer like in the mouth of the character. The characters have like a different lung capacity. So one of the characters like has asthma, the other one of the character like is pregnant. And what students really liked about this is that it's like an hands-on like experience. So they can grab like the tool, like the spirometer in that case, and they can interact with different people. And like in the real lab, you don't necessarily have access to like this kind of like instrument, let's say. So that's something that students really liked about our virtual lab.
Yeah, those are just a couple of examples, but as Francisco mentioned, we do test these simulations with students, right? We try to get a sense of what was too difficult for them, where did, in some cases, they get stuck, so we can address that and fix it, and then what stands out, right? What really made the lesson and the science and the concepts come to life for them a little bit. So just a couple of quick examples. Of course, if you're new to Labster, these are just GIFs that we're showing you right here, so you can actually try out these simulations, at least microanatomy of a neuron today, and the pulmonary ventilation will be out in another 4 weeks or so. But you can just sign up and try any of these out. And of course, in the simulation itself, it's a completely 3D immersive experience where you can turn around and have your avatar go to different lab benches and interact with different components. So a couple of other quick things I want to mention. I made reference to it before, but sort of scaffolded around the simulations, we have various supplements that can be used and oftentimes customized in different ways. So we have just some simple lab manuals or study guides that are in Google Docs or in Word, so you can customize it if you want to and assign it to students. We have theory pages that are available with a lot of that theory content. It's almost a mini digital textbook chapter that comes with the simulation, a lab report template, animation videos in some cases that we're pulling out of simulations and making available as just a 2-minute YouTube video, images, quiz questions, things that are available outside of the simulation, in addition to the actual learning tool itself. Nursing, I mentioned we have a really exciting new partner in UBSIM. So UBSIM is a really, the leading provider for nursing training or nursing education in a kind of interactive simulated approach. So you see some students here, some nursing students in the video to the right using it's an Oculus Quest virtual reality headset. So UBSIM is that one step further in some cases of having that full VR experience. But you also work in tandem with other students and your facilitator. You have access on a laptop too. So a lot of really exciting opportunities with UBSIM. It's also an extremely customizable platform. So I would encourage anyone who also teaches in a nursing program or has colleagues who do, ubsimvr.com is the URL. And you can also learn a little bit more about them on the Labster website too. So, and you'll be hearing more there's more to come, let's say, on UBSIM. We have plenty of case studies on the website. They're available we have a resources tab. So in case you haven't already, I would encourage you to go to the Labster website, reach out to us. You can sign up for sort of a free trial and get essentially completely free open access to all of our 250 simulations. Play them, mess around a little bit, look at our course packages, see what we have available. And then of course you can always set up a time to reach out and speak to someone from the Labster team in either in Europe or Latin America or North America or really anywhere in the world. So that's our quick that's our quick overview here. So I think maybe what I will do is just take a moment to stop sharing my screen, I think, and take a look to see if there are any questions. If you have any questions and you'd like to ask them or you haven't yet, I encourage you to do so now. So yes, I see one which is asking how many new virtual lab simulations will be coming out in 2022, sort of related to anatomy and physiology. And maybe we don't have an exact number, but Francisco, do you have a general sense of that?
Yeah, so what we try to do is I think we have at least, so we try to have like 4 simulations per quarter. So we'll be like around 15, I would say, plus like the 20 that we have today.
Exactly, 20 that we have already, 3 that just came out, 4 more in April, another 5 in July, maybe another 4 or 5 later in the fall. So we chip away at it over time, and we're it takes a little while to build these because we're doing everything that we possibly can to ensure that we're building good tools. Any other? I had one other question that was around grading, and so maybe Professor Bailey, you can maybe mention again what you do in terms of grading simulations, how you approach those. if at
Yeah.
all?
I take that as a part of my lab experience. They have 25% of their lab grade is assigned to their Labster simulations. That's enough that it gets their attention, but it's not enough that it's overly penalizing. However, I found if they're doing them, they're going to do better in the in-person lab as well. So it's valuable.
That's great. All right. Any other, just give a moment for any final questions. You can add those into the chat or the questions field. But if not, oops, I do see one here. They're a little bit hard to view. See a few comments. Are there any other questions that I may have missed? Yeah, just asking about, can we increase the I guess the number of this type of simulation? And absolutely, as Francisco said before, that's the plan. And we're definitely, as I mentioned before, investing in creating more short simulations and other kind of spin-off tools where you can mix and match and add things to your syllabus in different ways. So,
Mark,
yes.
could I add a comment to that?
Yeah, please.
A year and a half ago, I didn't think you had enough, but you have more simulations than I can possibly use, and they're good quality, which is the better point, the key point. You'll find that when you start doing these, you can't possibly work them all into your course. So that's a good thing. And you're adding more, as you say, so it only gets better.
That's good to hear. I actually have a related question, which is when you're trying to understand what fits into your course, Richard, how do you approach it, right? Are you sort of looking through every single Labster physiology simulation? Are you starting with a particular topic that you know is tough to teach? How do you kind of approach it?
That's the latter, Mark. It's the ones that I have trouble getting across. Those are the ones that it's proven to be the most valuable. As Margaret said, blood typing is notoriously hard to try to get the concept across. They have a hard time imagining that the antigen is a surface protein. It stays with those blood cells, and the antibodies are free floating. Trying to get them to get that point across the Labster simulation is worth its weight right there. But yeah, that's kind of the way I've approached it.
Okay, that's great. That's really helpful. I think that makes sense. That's how a lot of people. It's like, what is the challenge? What is the problem to solve, so to speak? And then is there a tool that's available that would be a good fit? So thank you for that. I have a question here. What computer technical requirements are there for students to use Labster remotely? Essentially, very, very few, if any. There's no software to download. There's no Flash or any ancient piece of technology. Essentially, students just need a laptop. We're not fully capable yet or compatible with let's say all iPads and mobile phones, but we're actually moving in that direction for the future, absolutely. But all students need is a laptop or some kind of computer with Google Chrome or Firefox. Those are the two web browsers that work best. If you imagine what Labster is, this incredibly sort of 3D graphics rich experience, it's not like opening a web page with a video on it or something like that. It's a little bit more of a intensive platform. Labster is built on Unity, which is actually the largest gaming platform in the world, and that's where our technology sort of comes from, the base of our technology. But really, you can go in the Labster Help Center and see the very specific requirements for people's computers and web browsers, but all you really need is an internet connection and Google Chrome, and that's it. So let's see, is there any other questions here that I missed? I think that looks like it. Yeah, some great suggestions about pharmacology simulations that could be created. So, well, thank you so much, everyone. I don't see any other questions coming in. If I missed it for any reason, please reach out with those or reach out on the Labster website. But we hope you'll take a look at some of our content. I hope this was helpful. And thanks so much, and good luck. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you so much again, Professor Bailey. Bye-bye, all.
Thank you, Mark. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.